Hey guys, David here. This is day 9 of crypto, pignet, and DeFi talks that I'm doing. Today I've got my Space Fund shirt on, which at first blush you might not think is crypto related, but as you can see, space will be tokenized. And that's what I want to talk about today. Tokenizing everything, tokenizing the world, and why this is important. So this is something that I've been passionate about ever since I got into blockchain in 2012. As soon as you can send money over the internet, you start asking the question, can I send other things over the internet? Can I send ownership in something over the internet? And so this idea was first introduced into the blockchain in 2013 by J.R. Willett with his white paper about putting assets onto the blockchain. There have been a number of ideas being thrown around about how to do that. They were called colored coins at the time. You were, coloring a token on the blockchain and changing it from, oh, this is sending a Bitcoin to, oh, this is sending a house. This is sending a car. This is sending some ownership of something. And with the launch of Mastercoin in April of 2014, that reality came forth and people started putting all sorts of assets on the blockchain. And this only accelerated in 2015, 2016 with the launch of Ethereum and the ERC20 standard for issuing tokens on a blockchain. It became much easier for developers to create tokens that represented just about anything. And that sort of brings us to today is, okay, now the bar is much, much, much lower to create these assets on blockchain. But what benefit does that bring? Why tokenize the world? Why do I want to be able to send all these things over the internet? And for me, the answer is we need to reinvigorate and open up the world's innovation, right? Today, it's become very, very centralized. Most small startups and companies don't succeed and get all the way to IPO. It's more expensive than ever in order to do an initial public offering in the United States. And so what you see instead is companies getting bought up by larger companies. For every IPO, there must be 1,000 acquisitions of smaller companies by Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, all sort of the normal cast of characters. And sometimes they get rid of those products because they didn't want them in the market. They just wanted the team or the technology. Hopefully they roll it into their own technology stack and it makes it available to a lot of people. But either way, average people didn't really have an opportunity to be involved in that capital creation process. From the early stages where most companies are funded by VCs to the later stages where most companies are funded by large private equity firms to being acquired by the company, the average retail investor had no part in that process whatsoever. So it's not like the old days in the 90s where you could buy into a project early stage because people IPO'd much earlier. The average used to be 4 years to IPO. And I think the average is now 14 years from start to IPO. So those few companies that are lucky enough to IPO, it's such a higher bar these days. You see these big companies like Uber waiting until they have a multi-billion-dollar valuation before they go to the public. What that means is the public had no access from when the company was a $10 million startup to when it was a $10 billion IPO. They missed out on that 1,000x increase that's effectively only available to VCs and accredited investors. Now, things are slowly changing in the United States. We have the Jobs Act, which was passed in the Obama days, which said, okay, we're going to allow crowdfunding and more average people to access that. And, unfortunately, the limits have been set very, very low, about a little more than $1 million you can do in a Reg CF offering. And so startups really haven't adopted it at scale. Now, there are proposals to finally raise that limit for crowdfunding to $5 million, which I think would be a wonderful thing. And what blockchain can do in all of this is effectively level the playing field and lower the costs for startups to use these avenues, because digital cap tables, because that's all security tokens really are, is digital cap tables representing securities in a company, can easily and cheaply be made available, right? The costs involved are usually what stop a startup from making it accessible to more people, or their lawyers tell them, it's too much trouble, only take accredited investors. And I've always had a fundamental issue with that, because I wasn't born rich, didn't have a trust fund, wasn't an accredited investor. I was, an upstart entrepreneur building companies long before I heard about Bitcoin in 2012. I was building companies as a teenager, as a young person, and I always thought it was a bit unfair that I should block people like myself from investing in early stage startups. And so I've always tried to push for as much access as I could offer anybody who invested in my startups. And so I think that's important that we expand that and extend that. And blockchain takes it a step further. It makes it a global thing when it comes to fundraising, right? We've seen the success and the amazing products that have come out of Kickstarter, for example. I mean, I remember the Pebble watch when they sold all of those watches, and they built them. That basically created this category, right? Long before Apple did a watch, or a digital watch, a smartwatch. There was the Pebble guys, right, who were pioneering that, and it was the masses of retail people who wanted that product that were happy to fund it. But unfortunately, up until now, it's still been very, very difficult for companies to launch in that way. You could sell a product, but you couldn't fund a company. And a lot of times you need a company to build the product, right? It creates this catch-22 type of situation. So, look at the ecosystem and you'll see an enormous amount of work being done, right? Polymath released their platform for security tokens. Vertalo has done an amazing job with digital cap tables and all of the back end in order to issue these security tokens. Abacus has done amazing work on the legal tech side of all this, on the smart contracts. All of these groups are folks I've tried to support and really give them the resources they needed, the connections they needed, because I think secured tokens are this huge thing. It's taking all the world's real world assets and making them available to the average person. And having grown up a middle class, person without access to wealth, that's really important to me, because I want the next guy behind me to have an even easier time of accessing these capital markets and all the value that's created from new technology. Even my own story is largely dependent on the internet, right? Since I think probably my first company I incorporated, I used LegalZoom. I was a broke kid. I didn't have the money to pay a lawyer 10 grand to incorporate something. So I went on to LegalZoom.com. I read about every state and all the differences, and eventually, you understand the advantages of Delaware, and you can incorporate there fairly cheaply. You don't actually have to be 18. There's no age requirement to incorporate. So put together my first corporation via LegalZoom. I think I was 18 or younger. And so, those tools of the internet allowed me my career as an entrepreneur building companies, and now as an investor investing in companies and protocols and dApps and all of this infrastructure. And so I think we'd have 1,000 more guys like me if we continue to lower those barriers. So the next way to lower that barrier is make the capital formation process not so painful. Make it globally accessible. Make it at a scale that's meaningful. Make it in a way where it can be tokenized across a huge number of people and folks can get access. There's always risk in startups, but you got to let people take that risk. Otherwise, you are preventing them from climbing the economic ladder. And so I really see this as sort of a fundamental moral and ethical issue. So, just encourage you to check out all the projects, whether it's Polymath or Vertalo or Abacus or, so many more exchanges and others that are working on getting security tokens live, and a lot of the regulations have finally been put in place in Liechtenstein, Switzerland, Germany. Many of jurisdictions around the world, like Singapore and Hong Kong, have test beds where they've allowed a lot of this innovation. So really exciting to see that trend continuing. Great platforms call out to Bank to the Future. That's helped pioneer a lot of this internationally. They've done an amazing job. Thank you, Simon Dixon, for all of your hard work. You've certainly enabled a lot of the companies that I've supported to be successful. And so I'll stop there, but wanted to cover why tokenizing the world, tokenizing assets in space, is extremely important. Space Fund is one of the venture capital groups I work with, and they're tokenizing their portfolio. They're one of the first venture capital firms in the world to tokenize their portfolio and help issue a security token so people can access all of these investments through them. And I think that's hugely important, and especially in this crazy situation that we're all in right now. I can't wait for Starlink to go live, right? We need global internet like yesterday. It's going to take the traditional companies a lot of effort just to keep up with the infrastructure demand with everybody at home, everybody working remotely. So I know we're at 360 satellites that have been launched so far by SpaceX. Congratulations, Elon, with the next launch that'll put it over the 400 satellite threshold that they need to go live with limited internet for the US. So, excited to see that continue going, and think it's really important in this time. So anyway, I'll call it there. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for following along on this journey. Wash your hands, be kind to one another, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.